Yourself while I've been on board Celebrity Constellation. Now, we've got an amazing crowd here today. Once again, for all of you, thank you, one person clapping, I appreciate that. We've had an amazing response from a fantastic gentleman on those talks. Many of you have been following this guest speaker since the beginning, earlier in the cruise when we started the conference rooms, and it was so popular. We brought it to the theater for you guys to make the most of an amazing presentation. And today is his final talk. Once again, this is all part of your Celebrity Life activities on board, and it's part of our Beyond the Podium Speaker Series, and we want to enrich you and educate you on these amazing journeys throughout the world. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, final time, please welcome on his talk of the fall and rise of empires, making sense of the Mediterranean sea routes. Please welcome Mr. Michael Tunks.
And good afternoon, everybody. What a pleasure it's been making these presentations to you, and I've got a lot to get through this afternoon. This is probably 2 or 3 presentations squashed into one. We had a chat to the captain, nothing we can do about turning the ship around, so I've just got to get through this really quickly. So, I'm Michael from Australia. If this is your first time, you might have a bit of catching up to do because I'm going to skip over some of the stuff we've touched on in the last presentations. We've looked at the first trading empires, the battle for the sea routes that rose out of those trading empires, how the Romans took over the whole Mediterranean and called it the Mare Nostrum, or their own lake. And today we're going to look at the rise and fall of empires. Now, just a bit of explanation. These first 3 talks were looking at history through the lens of trade and how trade spread civilization and culture and built up empires. I'm going to backtrack a little bit today, and we're going to look at 9 empires from the beginning of empire rise in the Mediterranean, and that's our focus in the Mediterranean. 9 empires from the Cyclades right through to the Ottoman Turks. So and there's a couple in there that we've touched on: Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and Romans. I'll just have a slide each because we've covered those in the previous talks and move on. So we'll also touch on the Trojan War. Our VIP for today is Alexander the Great. And don't forget 5 quick questions at the end to see how well you took a lot of this in. So here we are, travelling up the coast between Italy and Croatia, the Eastern Mediterranean. A lot of the action I want to start with started here. This is Greece, Turkey, and these islands around here. So this is where the first rise of civilizations that we know of in the Mediterranean started. We could go back to, right over to the left here, to the Iberian Peninsula. We do have evidence of Neanderthal fossils there. The last remnants of Neanderthal life are found there. Then there's this huge gap in history until we start to get these trade routes starting, civilizations forming, and in the Cyclades, the first evidence. Here's Crete and the islands and Greece. Now, empires comes from the Roman word imperium, meaning power. And usually it means being united in one place. Now there's 2 types of empires, and you'll be familiar with these. There's a territorial empire, where the territories are all contiguous or they all join onto one another. So the Roman Empire was contiguous. It started in Italy and then expanded to the other countries next to it and around the Mediterranean. The other type of empire, sorry this is so low, was something like the British Empire, which was non-contiguous. You had an island and then it planted the United States, Australia, India, non-adjoining, non-abutting countries. So that was a non-contiguous empire, but an empire nonetheless. So this is the span of today's talk, from the Cycladians through the Byzantines, spanning from prehistory through to the modern period. So I hope you got your seatbelts on for this one. Let's start with the Cycladians. This is about the extent of what we know about them. These buried idols that we found, very distinctive. Cycladian idols around 3200 BC we're going back to. So if we emerged out of Africa around 15,000 years ago, as I referred to earlier in an earlier talk, there's this huge gap of about 10 to 12,000 years where people were starting to spread back. It was the recession of an ice age, so the Glaciers were moving back, people were moving further north and repopulating old lands. And now we start to get first evidence with the Cyclades. Now this map is showing our first 3 civilizations. The islands in grey were the Cyclades. They were a seafaring people, they lived on the islands and they boated between them with their own sort of trade. The second one I'll get to, the Minoans, were down here on Crete, and then this line is the third one, the Mycenaeans, that took over all 3, and you'll see how they flowed into one another. So the Cyclade Islands, including Santorini, which at that time was a complete island. It had not exploded during the times of the Cycladians. Now the Minoans, second group, were nearby neighbours, also seafaring people. And they was the home of the legendary King Minos, king of the Minoans. They were a significant naval power, and their power enabled them to take over the islands of the Cyclades and subjugate them to the Minoan dynasty. They traded far afield, and they touched base with the trading that was going on in Mesopotamia and in Egypt. So they got right over to that eastern coastline and tapped in with other civilizations. And we can see in the artwork that we can still see on the Isle of Crete some of the influence of Greek civilization, and they're classed as the first European, the real European civilization, because they touched base with others around them. Cyclades were very isolated and introspective. There was commercial contact with ancient Egypt. Now this is really interesting because myths have arisen out of that contact, which I'll get to in a moment. So as I say, Crete was over here. They touched base with these trade routes down through Egypt and through Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. And in images like this, there is definite influence coming from Egypt, this side-on profile of people. It's how the Egyptians used to portray their portraits as well. And we see that in the artwork in Crete. And this was one of their sports. We think that this is showing a bull with 2 helpers and a person here vaulting over the bull leaping fresco. So one way to entertain yourself. Now, the Thera eruption down here on the left, this was the volcano on Santorini. There's a big window of when we think this happened, around 1650 BC to around 1500 BC, so around that period. But this was when the volcano erupted, it fell away and caused a tsunami that went off into the north of the Mediterranean, headed north of Santorini. This was a fallout map. So Santorini is in here. This is how they feel the ash disseminated, about 1 centimetre deep right up here through the Black Sea, 12 centimetres deep around here, 20 centimetres deep of ash here falling. Now this timing is really interesting. You can see how the ash cloud is falling right over this period, this area, the Fertile Crescent and Israel and parts of Egypt. Now around the 1500 BC, the Bible tells us there was a famine that caused Jacob and his family to head south to Egypt. Joseph had already been sent down there and had become one of the leaders down here, gathering the crops ready for a famine. This could have been the cause of the famine. It's around the right time. There's no real justification for it, but just the timing's about right. And it's just an interesting way that history can come together. Now, the tsunami that came out of this headed north and south and wiped out the island civilizations. Now the Mycenaean civilization was ensconced on the island of Crete. It had a huge naval presence, its cities were along the coast, and they were probably wiped out or decimated by this 50-foot tidal wave that they believe came through. Now, we're about here, this period of time. This map that I keep referring to, this climatology map of when we had warm periods and cool periods throughout recorded history. This happened around here. And the thing I haven't pointed out to you is when we move from a warm period to a cold period, there's lots of seismic activity. are the earthquakes, tectonic movements, and volcanic activity.